The Forbidden's question, the human space station floated silently above the glowing blue star, its metal hull shining under the distant light. Inside, corridors hummed with the sound of engines and the quiet footsteps of crew members moving between duties. Among them was Daniel, a young human officer with calm eyes and a patient nature. Today, he had been assigned to the cultural exchange room, a place where humans and alien visitors could share knowledge. He didn't expect the day to be anything more than a routine shift, but fate had other plans. Sitting across the table from him was Lyra, an alien girl from the planet Verith. She had smooth silver skin that caught the light like moonlight on water. Her large violet eyes seemed to take in every detail of the room. She was curious about everything, from the way humans greeted each other to the strange foods they ate. Over the past weeks, Daniel had answered many of her questions, but today, she leaned forward with a seriousness that made him pause. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice musical yet direct, "how do humans make more humans?" Daniel froze, his mind going completely blank for a moment. It wasn't the kind of question he expected over morning tea. He tried to read her face, wondering if this was a joke, but there was no humor in her expression, only pure, innocent curiosity. Her violet eyes were wide, waiting for an answer. Daniel cleared his throat. Well, that's a complex topic." Lyra tilted her head slightly. "Complex? But you know the answer, don't you?" Around them, a few other crew members, both human and alien, glanced over but pretended to be busy. Daniel could almost feel their ears tuning into the conversation. "Why do you want to know?" he asked, trying to buy time. Lyra blinked slowly. "Because I study your culture, your history, your science. I have read about human life cycles, birth, growth, aging. But there is a gap in the data." She tapped the small tablet on the table, its screen showing human anatomy diagrams. "This part here. It says natural reproduction, but the details are classified. Why would something about creating life be a secret?" Daniel felt his cheeks warm. The question was innocent, but answering it could lead to a very awkward situation. The station's AI, monitoring the room as always, gave a soft chime. "Educational resources are available," the AI's calm voice said. "Warning, some material may be considered sensitive to non-human species." Lyra straightened her posture. "If humans can learn it, I can learn it too." Her tone was matter-of-fact, not challenging but certain. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. He had two choices: give her a vague, scientific explanation that would leave her unsatisfied, or show her something from the human educational archives. But he also knew that once she learned, there would be no going back. "Lyra," he said slowly, "this isn't just science, it's also a cultural and emotional subject for humans. It's tied to personal values, relationships, and sometimes even privacy." She leaned closer, her eyes never leaving his. "That makes it even more important for me to understand. How can I truly know humans if I do not know how they create life?" Her words struck him. She wasn't mocking or prying. She genuinely wanted to learn. Daniel opened the station's archive console, his fingers hesitating over the controls. He searched the educational database for human reproductive biology. The eye immediately flagged the file. Content level, mature educational. "This file contains detailed biological processes. Proceed." Daniel stared at the prompt. He glanced at Lyra. She was calm, patient, and ready. The other crew members pretended to keep working, but he could see the corners of their mouths twitching in anticipation. Finally, Daniel exhaled. "All right. But you asked for it." He tapped the confirmation. The console screen lit up with a title in bold white letters: Human Reproductive System, Comprehensive Educational Module. Lyra's eyes widened slightly, her silver skin catching the light as she leaned forward. Daniel could already feel this was going to be a strange day. Somewhere in the background, one human engineer whispered to another, "I can't believe he's actually going to show her." The video began with calm music and diagrams of cells joining together. Lyra watched silently, her gaze focused and analytical. For now it was just biology, harmless, scientific and simple. But Daniel knew it wouldn't stay that way for long. The real question was, how would she react when the video moved from diagrams to real human footage? And deep inside, a part of him couldn't help but wonder, what would happen if an entire alien species learned about this in detail? Because sometimes the most innocent question could change everything. Asterisk, the video that shouldn't be played. The diagrams on the screen slowly faded into the next segment. Daniel's fingers hovered over the console, ready to pause at any moment. He knew the upcoming part wasn't like the safe biology slides they had just seen. It was a detailed, visual section from an old human educational archive. Something that was never meant to be casual entertainment. He glanced at Lyra, expecting hesitation, but she sat upright, her silver hands folded neatly, her violet eyes locked on the screen like a student eager for a final lesson. The IS calm voice returned. Warning, visual content ahead, viewer. Discretion is advised. Daniel opened his mouth to offer her one last chance to back out, but before he could speak, she raised her hand slightly. Proceed, she said, her voice soft but steady. There was no fear in her tone, only curiosity. For a moment, Daniel wondered if she even understood what viewer discretion meant in human culture. The video shifted. Animated models became highly detailed simulations. The colors, the movements, everything was far more realistic than he remembered from his own school days. It explained each stage with calm narration, breaking down the process into steps. Lyra's eyes followed every motion carefully. She occasionally tilted her head, her alien mind clearly trying to compare it to the reproductive method of her own species. A few humans in the room looked down at their datapads, pretending to work, but Daniel caught them sneaking glances, waiting to see how this would unfold. To them, it felt almost like watching a prank in slow motion, except this wasn't a prank. This was real. If Lyra found the content disturbing, it could lead to an awkward diplomatic report. If she misunderstood it completely, it might spark an even bigger mess. As the video went on, Lyra suddenly leaned back, her silver eyebrows knit together. Her voice was thoughtful, not shocked. Your species joins your bodies together for this? Voluntarily? Daniel hesitated. Yes. And usually with someone they care about deeply. Her eyes narrowed slightly. We do not touch for reproduction. It is a transfer of energy between minds, done in a sterile chamber. We do not share our physical forms this way. The way she said it made Daniel realize just how alien her culture truly was. But the video continued. It moved into real archival footage, not indecent or inappropriate, but still far more intimate than anything Lyra had likely seen before. She leaned forward again, her face unreadable, her breathing slowed, almost as if she was concentrating harder than before. When the narrator explained concepts like attraction, emotional bonding, and human family creation, Lyra's gaze flickered with something new. It wasn't disgust, it wasn't fascination alone. It was a mix of curiosity and respect. Still, Daniel could feel the tension building in the room. He wondered if he should stop it before the next segment began, the one that was even more detailed. But just as his finger moved toward the pause command, Lyra spoke without looking at him. Do not stop. I need to understand everything. Her voice was calm, but it carried weight, the kind that made Daniel realize this wasn't just about personal curiosity. It was about something bigger, something he didn't yet see. The AI, as if sensing the importance, continued without interruption. Every crew member nearby now pretended to be very busy, but Daniel knew they were all silently waiting for the moment when Lyra's reaction might change. What none of them realized was that she wasn't simply reacting to the video. She was memorizing it. Every word, every image, every fact, for a reason she had not yet revealed. And somewhere in Daniel's gut, a quiet warning echoed. This wasn't just the video that shouldn't be played. This was the video that, once seen, could never be unseen. and he had just given it to someone who might share it with an entire alien world. Reactions and realizations. The room felt strangely quiet. The hum of the station's engines faded into the background as the video reached its final sequence. Soft music played under the narrator's voice, explaining how human reproduction often began with emotional bonds. For Lyra, this was new territory. Her species valued knowledge and efficiency above all else. They did not link reproduction to feelings, love, or personal choice. She blinked slowly, her violet eyes fixed on the last frame of the video. Daniel hesitated to speak, but the silence grew heavy. Finally, she asked, "So, you choose? You do not reproduce because it is required, but because you wish to?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, in most cases, it is a decision between two people." She tilted her head. "And you attach emotions to it? Emotions that last even after the act?" "Sometimes for a lifetime," Daniel said quietly. Her silver skin seemed to shimmer faintly in the room's light, as if reflecting an inner thought. Then, without warning, Lyra let out a soft laugh, not mocking, but filled with wonder. To think, a species would make the creation of life into an act of connection. We do not understand this. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "What about your people? How is it done for you?" She spoke slowly, as if revealing something personal. "We exchange thought essence in a prepared chamber. Two minds connect, exchange life energy, and part no touch, no closeness. It is efficient." The way she said efficient made Daniel realize she might be questioning if efficiency was truly better. The other crew members pretended to keep working, but their ears were clearly tuned in. One human engineer glanced at Daniel with a smirk, as if to say, "You've opened a door you can't close." But Daniel's focus stayed on Lyra. She was not embarrassed, nor was she disgusted. Instead, she seemed fascinated, like she had just discovered a missing piece in her study of human nature. "I understand the physical part now," she said, "but I do not yet understand. Why risk so much emotion? Why risk pain for something that could be done without it?" Daniel thought for a moment before answering. "Because sometimes what makes life worth living is not just survival. It's the connections we make along the way." She went quiet, letting his words hang in the air. Her gaze drifted toward the viewing window, where the distant star glowed like a living ember. But then Daniel noticed something odd. Lyra's hands were resting on her tablet, and the recording light was blinking. "You're saving this?" he asked carefully. She didn't look at him. "I want to study it again later. In private." Daniel frowned. "Lyra, this was for your personal understanding, not for distribution." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "I understand," she said, but there was a tone in her voice that made him uneasy. In that moment, Daniel realized she was not only learning for herself, she was preparing to share this knowledge, maybe with her entire world. And if that happened, the way her people saw humans could change forever. The thought sent a small shiver through him. Knowledge could unite species, or divide them, and now one alien girl held the kind of knowledge that might do either. The cultural clash the next day. The cultural exchange room was filled with an unusual energy. Daniel arrived expecting another quiet learning session. Instead, he found Lyra already seated, her posture straight, her eyes brighter than usual. Around her sat 3 other alien visitors from Vareth, older, more serious, and clearly here for a reason. "Daniel," Lyra greeted, her tone polite, but sharper than before. "These are senior observers from my delegation. I have told them about yesterday's lesson." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had imagined this might happen, but not so soon. The older alien studied him with expressions that were unreadable. One of them finally spoke. "Is it true, human, that your species joins physically to create life?" Daniel hesitated, his mind racing for a diplomatic way to respond. "Yes," he said at last, "but it is more than that. It is an act tied to emotion, trust, and choice. The aliens exchanged glances. One of them made a low sound that might have been disapproval. In our culture, the elder said, reproduction is conducted in the hall of continuance. It is efficient, clean, without unnecessary complications. The way he said complications made it sound like an insult. Lyra didn't seem offended on his behalf. Instead, she looked intrigued. But maybe that is the point, she said softly. The elders turned to her, puzzled. Point? One of them asked. Lyra met their eyes without flinching. Humans choose to make it personal. They risk emotions, they risk rejection, they risk pain. But in doing so, they create bonds that last beyond the act itself. Daniel stayed quiet, watching the shift in the room. The elders were not angry, but they were unsettled. One tapped the table slowly. This is wasteful, yet intriguing. Another leaned forward. If such bonds are real, they might explain the human tendency for loyalty. It could be an evolutionary strategy. Daniel almost smiled. Even when discussing love, the aliens spoke like scientists. But the conversation was far from friendly. One elder narrowed his eyes at Daniel. If this knowledge spreads among our people, it could disrupt centuries of tradition. It could cause instability. Daniel's shoulders tensed. He suddenly realized they weren't just curious. They were worried. Lyra must have noticed too, because her voice grew firm. Knowledge should not be feared. It should be understood. Her words hung in the air. The elders looked at her as if she had just crossed an invisible line. Daniel sensed a change in the mood, a subtle tightening. This was no longer just an academic discussion. It was becoming a test of cultural values. He could almost feel the station's air grow heavier. Somewhere deep down, he knew that the moment this information left the room, it would no longer belong to either him or Lyra. It would belong to history. The emotional layer, the cultural exchange room, was quieter than usual. The elders had left after their tense discussion, leaving behind an air that felt both heavy and unfinished. Daniel sat across from Lyra, unsure if he should speak first. She was staring out of the wide viewing window, the blue star casting a soft glow over her silver skin. Finally, she said, "They think emotions are weakness." Her voice was calm, but Daniel could hear something else beneath it, a trace of defiance. In our world, she continued, feelings are tolerated only when they do not interfere with duty. Reproduction is duty, nothing more. She turned her gaze toward him, her violet eyes sharp. But you humans, you tie your duty to your heart. Why? Daniel leaned forward, searching for the right words. Because sometimes, the heart is what gives duty meaning. For us, bringing life into the world is not just survival. It's a choice we make with someone we trust. It's a connection we hope will last for years, maybe even for life. Lyra's eyes softened slightly, but her expression stayed thoughtful. You speak as if it is sacred, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. For many it is. It's not always perfect. Sometimes people are hurt. Sometimes things go wrong. But the possibility of creating something beautiful is worth the risk. Lyra tilted her head. Beautiful, she repeated, as if testing the word. In her language, beauty was often linked to structure and function, not to emotion. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she asked, have you experienced it? This connection you speak of? Daniel hesitated. Yes, he said finally, his voice softer than before. Her eyes lingered on him, as if she were trying to measure the truth in his words. And it made you stronger? Daniel gave a small smile. It made me human. Lyra looked back toward the window, but Daniel noticed the faintest trace of a smile on her lips. It wasn't mockery, it wasn't disbelief. It was the first sign that she was beginning to understand something beyond the science, something that could not be explained by diagrams or narrated videos. In her mind, Daniel could tell. A bridge was forming, a bridge between the logic of her people and the emotions of his. But deep inside, Daniel also knew something else. The moment she fully understood, she might carry this truth home, and if she did, Her people would never see humans, or themselves, the same way again. Asterisk the twist in the lesson. The next morning, Daniel walked into the cultural exchange room, expecting another quiet discussion. Instead, the station's AI greeted him with a sharp chime. Notice: unauthorized data transfer detected from the Human Biology Archive. Daniel froze. The AI's voice continued. Recipient: Varith Central Knowledge Network. Content: full educational module on human reproduction. His stomach sank. There was only one person who could have done it. He found Lyra seated at the same table as before, calmly scrolling through her tablet. "Lyra," Daniel said firmly, "tell me you didn't send that video to your homeworld." She looked up, her violet eyes calm. "I did." Her tone was not apologetic. If anything, it carried a quiet confidence. "Do you realize what you've done?" Daniel asked. Her silver fingers tapped lightly on the table. "I have shared knowledge. Is that not the purpose of a cultural exchange?" "This isn't like teaching them about human food or music," Daniel said, lowering his voice. "This will change how your people see us, maybe how they see themselves." Lyra's expression didn't waver. "They must know the truth. Our ways are efficient, but maybe efficiency is not the only path. Maybe my people need to see another way." Daniel ran a hand over his face. "You think they'll just watch it with open minds? No arguments? No backlash?" Lyra tilted her head slightly. "There will be arguments, but that is how change begins." The AI interrupted again. Additional notice: Varith Science Council requests live human speaker to explain emotional context of reproduction. Daniel stared at Lyra in disbelief. "You're pulling me into this?" "You're the one who showed me," she said simply. "And they will not understand without you." It hit him then. She hadn't just been curious. From the moment she asked the question, she had been planning something bigger. This wasn't just about her learning. It was about introducing an idea powerful enough to challenge centuries of her people's traditions. Daniel leaned back, exhaling slowly. Somehow, an innocent question had turned into a cultural revolution, and he was now part of it, whether he liked it or not. The galactic aftermath. Standard days later, the station's main hall was filled with a strange mix of tension and excitement. A massive holoscreen floated above the crowd, linking them to the Varith Science Council on the alien homeworld. Dozens of human and alien crew members gathered to watch. Daniel stood off to the side, still wondering how a simple conversation had brought him here. Lyra was beside him, her silver skin glowing faintly in the warm light of the hall. Her violet eyes held no fear, only determination. "This is your moment," she whispered. Daniel gave a small sigh. "I didn't sign up to be the galaxy's reproductive ambassador." "You didn't have to," she replied softly. "The truth chose you." The council chamber on the screen was filled with alien elders, the same kind who had once dismissed human ways as inefficient. Now they sat silent, waiting. Daniel stepped forward, feeling hundreds of eyes on him. He didn't launch into science instead. He spoke about connection, about how humans didn't just make life. They built families. They created bonds that could last for generations, and sometimes those bonds were the reason people found the strength to keep living. As he spoke, Daniel saw subtle changes on the council members' faces. Not all of them approved, but none interrupted. When he finished, there was a long silence. Then the council leader leaned forward. "Human," he said slowly, "we had not considered that life could be more than continuation. Perhaps there is value in your way." Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. She had gambled everything on this, and won. In the following days, the Varith news networks lit up with debates. Some called the human way reckless. Others called it beautiful. But for the first time in Varith history, reproduction was being discussed not just as duty, but as choice. On the station, Daniel couldn't escape the teasing. Crew members joked about him being the man who taught an alien world about love. He tried to wave it off, but part of him was quietly proud. Lyra, on the other hand, showed no embarrassment at all. To her, This had never been about scandal. It had been about understanding. And now, two worlds were closer than they had been just a week ago, one evening. As they watched the blue star through the observation window, Lyra spoke without looking at him. "You have changed my people, Daniel, and you have changed me." Daniel smiled faintly. "Guess that makes us even." The hum of the station filled the quiet between them. And somewhere in that silence, a bridge between two species grew stronger than ever before.